Let's take this show on the road. Ish, different day. I'll be bored out my mind. Hometown.
Hey friends, let's dye some yarn. Today I'm going to dye on some DK weight merino superwash. I've got 400 gram skeins here. And before you start dyeing, you need to soak your yarn. So I'm going to start off with that. I have a huge plastic container here. I sometimes dye commercially. That's why I have such a big one. You don't need that. You just need one big enough to soak the yarn completely. And I'm adding in about half a tablespoon of citric acid. We'll be adding in more later when we're going to dye the yarn as well. The citric acid in combination with the dye and heat, we will be heat setting this. We'll make sure that the dye actually sticks to the yarn. So I'm going to add in some water, just plain cold water. I got 2 liters and 4 liters, and we're going to add another 2 liters just because the container is so big and I want it to be enough water to soak the yarn. You don't have to go for specific measurements for this. It just needs to be enough to soak it. There we go. Next up, we are going to add zip ties to the skeins. And this will help to prevent them from tangling to themselves and to each other. So I'm just opening up the skein here. Here we go. And I'm adding on a zip tie. I use reusable zip ties. You can find those on Amazon. Highly recommend. And let's do that for the other 3 as well. There we go. And the 3rd one. There we are. And zip tie. And the last one. There we go. Zip ties on all 4. I'm going to step around to the other side of the camera. I'll just grab my yarns by the zip tie. There we are. Shaking them out. And we're going to add them into the water. So I just put it down here. And then I push the yarn down into the water so that it soaks properly. We want all of it to be wet and properly soaked, because if there are dry patches, the dye is not going to stick to it. There we go. Now we're going to let that soak for at least half an hour, and then we'll be ready to dye. The yarn has been soaking for a while and we are ready to start dyeing. Today I'm going to be dyeing in a large canteen. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add about a tablespoon of citric acid to the pan. Set that aside. And I'm going to add about 2 liters of water. And this is cold water. Next, we are going to add in our soaked yarn. And I'm just grabbing the zip tie. I'm squeezing out some of the water to not make a mess. And I'm going to add it to the pan lengthwise. There we go. And the next one. Same thing, squeezing out a little bit of the water. Adding it to the pan. And we're going to do the same for the last two. There we go. Now we're going to get our dye ready. Today we're going to dye yarn that is inspired by the Norwegian flag. I'm filming this in early May and the Norwegian National Day, May 17th, is coming up. I don't live in Norway currently though, but I am Norwegian and it's a big deal for me. So I have decided that I'm going to make a Norwegian flag inspired yarn. And the Norwegian flag is red, white and blue. I will be using Pro Chemical and dye in the color sky blue. And I will be using Jacquard acid dyes in fire red. And the way we're going to do this today is we're going to add red and blue to these squirt bottles that I found on Amazon. And I also do have some leftover blue from a previous project. I don't know if you can see that. I think so. So I'm going to be using that today. And I will be mixing some red as well. And I will be adding them to these bottles. I got a large spoon to poke around in the yarn with. Teaspoons to grab the dye. I use this little thing to mix the dye in the water. While using dyes, powder dyes like this, always wear a mask to protect your airways. This is a very, very fine powder and you do not want to get it in your lungs. And I've got some gloves as well. And I got an empty yogurt container with water that I can put my spoons in once I'm done using them. So let's get started. Since I've already got quite a lot of the blue one, I'm not going to mix any more of that. I poured it into my measuring cups, just so that I get a spout, which is easy to transfer to bottles, squeeze bottles. And I've added the same amount of water to this measuring cup as I have in the blue one. And I'm going to be mixing the red color. Before I start working with that, I put on my face mask. Do not forget to do that. There we go. And I'm going to grab the dye. Looks something like that. And I'm just going to add about half a teaspoon. And we will mix that. Make sure all the powder dissolves. I apologize if I sound a bit congested and breathing heavier here and there because I had a horrible cold a couple of weeks ago and I'm just at the tail end of the chest congestion of it all. There we go. Just put that in order. And here's what we got. The red dye. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to kick the camera. And now we're going to transfer to the bottles. Fingers crossed we can do this without spilling. I'm just going to stay here over my tray. There we go. We have some to spare as well. Oh, doesn't want to stick. That's okay. And we'll grab the blue one. There we go. And some to spare there as well. Alright, we are ready to start dyeing. So what we're doing here is we are going to heat up the water and the yarn. I'm using both of these plates, so I'm going to get those going. And in order for the dye to stick to the yarn, you need to have dye, you need to have citric acid, and you need to have heat. That is what's going to set the color. So I'm going to start off by letting it heat up a little bit before I start adding the dyes. Now since we don't have a lot of water in this pan, it's going to heat up really fast, which is what's happening here. And you need to be really careful because you don't want your yarn to burn. I'm just pushing it around to make sure we get hot water everywhere. And the way I check if the water is hot enough is I put on some gloves and I just poke my hands in it, like so. And we are not looking for it to boil, as it does here. We just want it to be heated up. And I'll be moving the pan around to make sure every part of it gets heated. Water is starting to heat up, so I'm going to add in the dyes. I'm starting with the red one. The reason why I have such small amounts of water in the pan is because there's more fluids in bottles. And I want to have a little bit of control of how it spreads in the pan. Adding in the blue. I'm going to go in with some more red up here. I'm going in with some red down here as well. I'm moving the pan a bit. Add some more blue. I'm pushing the nozzle down into the yarn as well. I want to make sure we get dye all the way through to the bottom. So why don't we add a little bit of blue up here as well? There we go. I'm moving the pan a bit. I'm going to poke the yarn to make sure we get dye all the way through. As you can see, it's lighter on the underside here. I'm going to grab the bottle and we'll add in some more. As well. I'm poking it and adding more dye where needed. There we go. I'm going to touch up the other red as well. I'm going to start by adding in some more, or filling up the bottle with red dye. I'm poking it just to make sure we get dye all the way through. Trying to avoid the red and the blue to mix too much. Got a lighter spot here. Adding in some more red here. And here as well. Here you can see we have a lot of white. Just going in, adding in some more. There we go. I'm going to do the same for the blue. I'm going to top off the blue bottle first. Now we're going to go in with blue as well. Make sure it's saturated all the way through. I'm adding in some more here and there, just shoving the nozzle down into the yarn and poking it with the spoon to make sure we get dye everywhere. I can see there are some lighter spots here and there. I'm trying to be careful not to spill on the white and the red. And I don't want to disturb the yarn too much. So now I want the dye to set where it is at. Let's do the end here. I'll continue to move the pan around to make sure everything is heated. And again, we're not looking for it to boil, we're just looking for it to heat up properly. I'll grab my glove. I'll be poking down. Make sure it's hot everywhere. There's a cold spot here. Heat it up on this edge a little bit. I'm testing one color at a time here. Trying not to mix them. Get a little bit more red here. Just rinsing off the red from my gloves. And I'm poking the blue. Need a little more heat here in the center. A little bit at the ends, not too much. Mostly at the center and along this edge a little bit. Now the water is hot in the entire pan and it is starting to exhaust. The water is clear. So I'm going to turn off the plates and I'm going to set the pan aside to cool before we can rinse it. And it is very important that it gets to cool completely before rinsing it. Otherwise you will shock the yarn. So I'll set it aside to cool and we'll get back to rinsing in a bit. The yarn has cooled completely now and it is time to rinse it. I'll be rinsing in my plastic bowl here that I just put in my sink. You can also rinse directly in your sink if you like. And I'm going to add cold water. And I'll be using soap, which is my go-to for rinsing yarn. You don't have to have this specifically. You can use conditioner, dish soap, whatever you got. I prefer this one. Just adding a good squirt in there. And we are going to fill up the bowl about halfway. A little bit more. I want to have enough water in the bowl for the yarn to move about a little. Okay, now we're getting there. There we are. I'm just grabbing the zip tie and I'll be squeezing out some of the water. There we go, in the bowl. And the second one, as you can see, the water in the canteen is clear, which means it has exhausted very well, the dye. And the last one. There we go. I'm putting them side by side in a bowl. I'm just going to pour out this water. I'm going to set it aside. I'm just pushing the yarn down into the water, not agitating it too much. I don't want it to be all tangled. There we go. And I'm grabbing the zip tie and I'm dunking it a few times. Make sure to also rinse the zip tie because sometimes there will be dye caught in that. There we go. I'm squeezing out the water. Not wringing or using any force. Just using my hands to squeeze it out. You could also use a salad spinner. Some people like to do that. I prefer to just use my hands. Let's see if we can catch the zip ties. I'm dunking it. There we are. And squeezing out the water. Now using soap you only need to rinse the yarn once, but I prefer to do it twice, just to be on the safe side. Let's see if we can get a zip tie. Here we go. Squeezing out the water. It's a really lovely red, white and blue. There we go. To pour out the water. This is a slight pink hue in the water, so there was a little bit of red pigment left, but very little. And I'm adding in some more water, and I'm going to give it one more rinse just to be on the safe side. And the bowl is clean, it's just stained from other, I've been rinsing dark yarns at a point and it sat in a bowl for a while, so it got stained, but it's absolutely clean. And we're adding in a little bit more. There we go. And we're putting the skeins back and rinsing them once more. Pushing them down into the water. There we go. And again, just squeezing out the water. Second skein, and we're doing the third one, dunking it a couple of times and squeezing out the water. And the last one. And there we go. Our Norwegian flag inspired yarn. I'm going to go hang it to dry now, and I'm just using a regular clothing rack for that. And it'll be a couple of days until it's completely dry and we can skein it again. There it is, my Norway inspired yarn, inspired by the Norwegian flag. I really love how this came out, and I can't wait to make something with it. I don't know what yet, but yeah, this is a yarn that just makes me happy to watch, really. Please let me know if you try to dye this colorway as well. I would love to see it, so tag me in social media. And also if you knit something with it, I would love to see that as well. So tag me, and I'll see you in the next one.